So, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't even hear about Company of Heroes 3 until the reveal the other day, and the last thing I expected was to be able to actually play it this week. But even so, man, I am so excited to take a look at this one. This franchise is one of my favorite RTS franchises of all time, and so that's why we're going to take a look at it today. Guys, this is BillyEatWorld again, and let's find out. Alright guys, how you going? Welcome to the video, and like I said, today we're going to be taking a look at Company of Heroes 3. Who would have thought, right? And by the way, I should point out that this is only a pre-alpha preview, so look, this isn't really going to be a true representation of what the game is going to be like. I really have to make that clear from the start of this video. But with that being said, the devs have been pretty honest about why they put the preview out so early. They want us players to get our hands on it and to give them feedback. So I'm not just going to be positive in this video, although it might be hard not to be because I love this game so much. But there are a few pretty critical things I want to talk about, and we're going to get into that in just a bit. Just before we do, though, we probably should talk about what Company of Heroes actually is and why you're seeing it on my channel, which is a channel that normally covers FPS games. And well, in a nutshell, it's because Company of Heroes is a real-time strategy game that doesn't really feel like a regular real-time strategy game. In fact, it actually borrows a lot from games like Battlefield. Obviously, this one is set in World War II, just like the other Company of Heroes games are, but the big thing that I really think that makes Company of Heroes unique is that it's a lot more simple than just about every other RTS game. It's not like Total War where you're dealing with a huge army full of battalion-sized units. Your total force is pretty much the size of an actual company, which is only about 100 to 200 men. Another thing I should mention is that you also don't have to gather resources in this game like you do in other games like StarCraft or Age of Empires. The way you get your resources is by capturing strategic positions around the map, and if you've ever played a Battlefield game before, well, you're going to recognize this as pretty much just like Conquest. There's three different types of resources. There's manpower, which is used to recruit units. There's fuel, which is for recruiting vehicles. And there's munitions, which is used for upgrades and for fire support. And some of those capture points I just mentioned, well, they're actually nodes for one of those resource types. And that gives you an incentive to capture them if that's what you need at the time. Now, I should also mention that in some Company of Heroes game modes, a couple of those flags become special victory points, and just like in Battlefield, when one team holds the majority of the flags, they'll drain tickets from the other team. So obviously that's going to make this game a lot more aggressive than most other RTS games, and if you are really aggressive, well, there's actually another way you can win. You can destroy the other team's base buildings. In this game though, or at least in the pre-alpha, the devs have decided to shake things up a bit. In one of the modes available in Skirmish, you have to defend a specific victory point or you'll actually lose the game outright. And it seems like they've also added another win condition in one of the other game modes where all you have to do is capture the territory surrounding the enemy's base and hold it until the timer runs out. So in a nutshell, lots more ways to win the game and to win the game much faster. Now, if you haven't already realized by now, when you combine all of these things, you start to realize that Company of Heroes is a lot more focused on the small unit tactics. And I mean, sure, if you want to be really good at this game, which I'm not by the way, you will have to improve your ability to micro, but trust me that this is one of the easier RTS games to learn. The good news is though, if you're already a veteran of Company of Heroes, well, you're going to notice straight away that this game is still cut from the same cloth. I mean, I was able to jump in pretty much straight away and figure out what I was doing. And sure, you're going to notice some changes, but for the most part, things feel pretty similar. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Company of Heroes has a couple of features that aren't as common in other RTS games, and well, they're all back in this one. For example, a lot of strategy games have some kind of cover or terrain modifier system, but Company of Heroes actually goes out of its way to highlight it, and it gives you indicators of where to put your units if you want them to be in cover. Also, like I said before, you've got the ability to call in fire support like artillery. And to counter that, there's a retreat mechanic which will force your units to quickly run back to the base. And what fire support you have access to is determined by what type of company you choose to run with. That system isn't fully integrated in Company of Heroes 3 yet, but you can see the beginnings of it trying to take shape. So once again, it's all back in this one. Now, another quick change I want to mention is on the topic of factions, and in saying that, I should mention that it's really good to see both the US and British factions back in this game, because you might remember those factions were actually paid DLC in Company of Heroes 2, which honestly I always felt was a bit scummy. I mean, maybe like you shouldn't make your players pay for the factions, especially if they're going to be available in multiplayer. Now, there's no sign of the Soviets in this one yet, because it looks like it's mostly going to be focused on the Italian and North African theaters from launch. But if you look at the cover art, though, you'll see there does look like there's going to be units from other countries like Italy and Australia in the game as well. So that'll be interesting to see how that actually works in-game. Probably the biggest change I noticed, though, was how the buildings worked, because you might remember back in Company of Heroes 2, every faction worked kind of differently. I mean, the Soviets and the Wehrmacht had to build buildings like a typical RTS game, but the American base, you might remember, was almost like a fortress, and the OKW had to set up mobile supply trucks. In this version, though, it looks like the British, Americans, and Germans will all have to build separate buildings, and how you unlock those buildings will actually change from faction to faction. And also, this is a small thing, but still worth mentioning, you don't actually need an engineer to build buildings anymore. You just select a new building from the HQ and place it down, and a team will come out of the HQ to build it instead. Now, look, I realize probably a lot of you guys that are regulars of this channel probably aren't into RTS games, and so I want to focus the rest of this video on some top-level stuff, and we'll do a deep dive on game mechanics later on down the track. And obviously, the most top-level stuff that you're going to notice about Company of Heroes 3 is the way that it looks and the way that it sounds. And I think to sum that up, I should just say it's a pre-alpha. I quickly booted up Company of Heroes 2 to compare the difference, and you can tell they're putting more detail into the units and the buildings in this game, but man, the frame rate is super choppy right now. And there really isn't a lot of graphics options to play with either, or any options for that matter. But once again, if you've never played a pre-alpha game before, this is just how it is. They're all like this. Also, another thing I noticed was that a lot of the assets and UI elements seem to be placeholders from Company of Heroes 2. Or worse yet, you'll notice that some of the assets don't even exist yet. Most of the menu items are just plain text, and some of the voiceover lines are like computer-generated speech. And also, if you ever see something that's bright pink or bright purple in a video game, usually it's because it's a placeholder texture for something that hasn't been finished yet. And so you'll notice a lot of that sort of stuff in this version. As far as I know, it's not a color choice the devs have made on purpose. This will all change when the final game comes out. Now, moving on, just before we finish up, we really need to talk about probably the biggest change you're going to notice in Company of Heroes 3, which is the change to the campaign. And once again, this is still a work in progress at the moment. You don't actually get to play through the whole campaign. You just get to see chunks that the devs are letting us try out. But from what I can see, though, the really cool thing, I think, is that unlike Company of Heroes 2, which was really linear, the campaign features a turn-based overworld design. And I think it would actually kind of feel a lot like a Total War game, except for the fact that a lot of the things don't seem to work in the same sort of way, and it's trying to take cues from the real-time strategy layer of Company of Heroes to build this world as well. And look, there is a ton of stuff to cover on this particular topic, so I'm going to leave stuff out in this video. But from my understanding, the way that it works is that you can control companies and detachments in this layer. Companies, which are made up of a couple of different detachments, are pretty much like an army is in Total War. And as well as that, you can also get naval units, which can be used for fire support as well. Now, it seems like when you actually use your units to attack enemy detachments, it just auto-battles them. But when you attack an objective with a mission attached to it, it'll actually go into a real-time battle. So it'll be interesting to see if this sticks into the final game. Personally, I'd prefer more of a Total War style of things where you can choose whether you want to auto battle or not, but I don't know. Maybe that's outside the scope of what the devs are trying to do here. Maybe I'm just hoping that the game's going to be more complicated than it actually is going to be. Now, to finish up, the last thing I want to talk about is the most important factor in all of this, and that's the release date. Because when the devs say that this is a pre-alpha, they actually mean it's a pre-alpha. It's not just like one of those AAA betas, which are pretty much just a marketing stunt brought out a few weeks before the actual launch to build up hype. The devs have said that Company of Heroes 3 won't even be coming out until late 2022. So we are seeing this really, really early. And that means a lot of what we've talked about in this video today could and probably will change between now and then. So bearing that in mind, from that perspective, I think the fact that devs were willing to put out a public version for testing so early is a really, really good sign. Just the fact that you can load it up and play it this early on in the development cycle without crashing is amazing. I've seen alphas and betas release a few months before launch that were less stable than this one. Does it excite me as it is right now? Well, I mean, the idea of a new Company of Heroes game excites me, but the actual game itself doesn't right yet. But if they iron out the frame rate, bump up the resolution, maybe add some more of those textures in, then I'm going to be really keen. I'm really keen to see this game develop, and I'm super happy the devs are taking the time to take us on that journey as well. But anyway, guys, that just about wraps it up for this video. So as always, please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And just remember that I can't possibly cover everything about this game in the one video. So if you think I've missed anything, please put it in the comments, and that way other people can read it as well. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out the links on screen now and in the description if you want to see any more of my videos. And also don't forget you can find my Twitter and Discord links down there as well if you want to keep in touch. And as always, until next time, see you later and have a good one.